Welcome, friends. My name is Tiffany Willoughby-Herard, and I work in the land of the Ahachiman and Tongva people in Southern California. Today, that means that I am part of the University of California, Irvine campus as a faculty member. I have just a moment to tell you about the National Conference of Black Political Scientists and our history and our mission. In April 1969, approximately 35 Black political scientists gathered at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to discuss the problems faced by persons teaching political science at historically Black colleges and universities. The group reconvened in September of that year at the annual meeting of the American Political Science Association in New York in September. It was the consensus of this now broader group that the problems facing Black political scientists, independent of their geographical location or institution, were sufficiently similar to warrant establishment of a national organization. Consequently, by 1969, this group of persons voted to establish themselves as the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. The organization's first annual meeting was held at Atlanta University in Georgia in May 1970. And just so you understand how consequential the founding of this organization has been, a number of other organizations have emerged because of the founding of NCOBPS, including the Association for the Study of Black Women in Politics, the National Council of Black Studies, the African Heritage Studies Organization, and many other brilliant organizations in political science in particular. The Latino Caucus, the Race and Ethnic Politics Group, and American Political Science Association, all of those found their earliest supporters and places of thriving and affirmation in NCOBPS. Our mission is that NCOBPS is organized to study, enhance, and promote the political aspirations of people of African descent in the United States and throughout the world. We aim to contribute to the resolution of the many challenges that Black people confront. Our organization promotes research in and critical analysis of topics usually overlooked and or marginalized in political science scholarship. Our scholarship must address wide-ranging real-world issues and not the narrow, often manufactured concerns of the discipline. In terms of impact, NCOBPS has over 400 active members representing colleges, universities, nonprofit organizations, government relations, political campaign firms, local, national, and state public sector agencies, including many brilliant social movement campaigns. Our collective membership teaches an estimated 1,000 undergraduate and graduate courses each year, with an average class size of 20 students. We have contact with over 20,000 students per year in the United States alone. NCOBPS also has a long tradition of identifying, mentoring, and supporting students interested in political science, especially in the areas of international relations, public policy, political communication, public affairs and administration, comparative politics, and political theory and political history. We offer scholarships, fellowships, and research awards to undergraduate and graduate students, and provide many activities for students to network and collaborate with faculty and practitioners of political science. The work we do is hard work, and most of us will tell you because of NCOBPS, we were able to serve our people in a way that reflected dignity and to build trust in our communities. Because of NCOBPS, all of these things are possible for us. I am so honored to welcome you to the 53rd annual conference. And this year we're talking about being at a crossroads and envisioning futures. What are Black futures? What are our possibilities for ourselves? What are we imagining? What kind of portals are we willing to travel through? And what comes next for all of us? I have the distinct honor of introducing one of the glittering and fabulous lights of our national leadership. Mayor Brandon Scott is going to be speaking next. And Mayor Scott, without a doubt, you are respected and loved and cherished. You know, my own son last summer got a chance to meet you at Earth Day, and it was a life-changing event. I can only tell you, from all the way in where you live to all the way where I live, your impact is felt. And we treasure you and thank you for taking time to welcoming us to the Baltimore, DC area. Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. And thank you, Tiffany, and tell your son I said hello. Pouring light and energy into our young people, who I say are our greatest resource, and they're not just our future, they are right now. It's one of the most important parts of my job. I am here this evening to briefly welcome you all, albeit virtually, to Baltimore. I wish you were all here in person so that we could give you some nice crab cakes, some of our great vegan food, and all the other things that we have to offer here in Baltimore. And of course, being a Black city with such a deep, deep history of how this city, Baltimore, has changed the world through so many of the Black folks that have come through Baltimore. But I also came here to say thank you. Thank you for choosing to pour light into our young people. Thank you for choosing to push beyond what the world wants to think about it when we talk about political science and scientists, and being able to showcase that we have the ability to not only be in this space, but be great in this space and grow in this space and challenge folks in this space in a way that we know is needed right now more than any time since the Civil Rights Movement, because we all know what's going on in this world, especially here in the United States. And really wanted to say thank you for everything that you all do each and every day as you guide the future generations of folks to come. I am just honored to be here, to have that love, to know that you all will always have my support, and look forward to working with you in any way that we can to make our world a better place, especially for our Black people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Scott. And we look forward to communicating with you and staying in touch with you. You're receiving lots of love in the chat while we're queuing up our next content piece. Lots and lots of claps and love and appreciation. People have turned out to see you. Thank you so much for making time.
Greetings, National Conference of Black Political Scientists. Hello, this is Councilman John Bullock, representing Baltimore's 9th District. I want to welcome you here to Baltimore. I do this with great pleasure and honor, not only as an elected official here in Baltimore, but also as a member of NCOBPS. And I remember seeing some of you in years past and look forward to seeing you in person soon in the future. And although we are meeting in a virtual fashion this year, I know we all wish we could be together, but we'll still have a great opportunity to have a rich discussion and dialogue around the work that folks are doing all around this country, as we talk about things like electoral participation and leadership and community organizing and activism and all the things that we see as important for our political discourse here in America, and particularly as it relates to Black politics. Again, Baltimore is a great place to have this discussion, being a post-industrial city that has had Black leadership for quite some time, but still struggles with many of the challenges that you guys have been investigating and things we work with on a daily basis, whether we're talking about the images of cities, what it means to have Black elected leadership across the gender divide as well. The great thing about this kind of meeting is that we have this intersection between scholars and practitioners, and I see myself as a bit of a both, and the work that we're also doing as it relates to mentorship. So I know that many of my mentors were members of NCOBPS. I know that many of your mentors as well were members of NCOBPS, and also some of the young people and scholars that you're mentoring as well. And so we're really creating a pipeline for folks to not only get engaged in the work from an academic point of view, but also from a practical point of view, and to bridge the divide between the two. So again, I really thank you for this opportunity. There's so much that we need to be talking about right now as it relates to our country and the moment that we find ourselves in. So again, welcome to Baltimore. When you are here, I look forward to interacting with you. So feel free to reach out to any of us, and really look forward to having a great week. Look forward to interacting with you. And so God bless and take care.
So friends, thank you very much for being here this afternoon and this evening. We now have the wonderful opportunity to hear something about the spirit of NCOBPS, and hear something about how we understand where we are at this moment in time. Again, our theme for this year is drawing us into a conversation about futures and crossroads. What is our future? So I'm going to share with you some wonderful sound footage that I'm calling the Ethos of Black Politics in 2022. That's an interview with our executive director, Provost Kathie Stromile Golden, Dr. Kathie Stromile Golden of Mississippi Valley State University. After the bomb threats that began January 5th, 2022, and went on through February and affected over 24 historically Black colleges and universities, Dr. Golden reached out to me and said, what are we going to do to make sure that people in the country understand the contributions of historically Black colleges and universities, and how critical these threats are, what these threats mean historically, and what they mean for the present, and what they mean for the possibilities of the future. So I have asked us to play this footage from her. Please listen closely, and I promise you will be edified, and you will learn a lot about the history of HBCUs and higher education. Go right ahead and start it now, please.
Good morning. I'm Claudia Shambaugh, your host, and this is the February 8th, 2022 edition of Ask a Leader. Today, my guest is Kathie Stromile Golden, Director of the International Program and Special Assistant to the President of Mississippi Valley State University. She's the provost there. The historically black colleges and universities have been taking some heat, and so we're going to cover all of that because it sort of dropped off the radar. We want to put it back on the radar and see how folks are faring there and in all the work that has to be done in that. So we'll be right back with Dr. Golden. Welcome back to the show. Today's program was born of the realization that several of the at least 12 historically black colleges and universities received bomb threats. That puts it in the passive voice. Listeners, I choose to say that they were threatened with the prospect of being bombed. And I was offered a guest prospect to cover this and many other confounding circumstances on college campuses. And I'm still looking at my calendar. It says 2022. My guest for the full hour is Kathie Stromile Golden to cover these circumstances. She is director of the International Program, and she's provost at the Mississippi Valley State University in Itta, Mississippi, where she previously served as the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and Director of the Delta Research and Culture Institute. She previously directed the Mississippi Consortium for International Development's Higher Education Development Project for Iraq. She was a Fulbright lecture researcher at the Academy for Public Administration under the President of Azerbaijan Republic, served in the International Development Partnerships activity at the United Negro College at Special Programs Corporation, and has held administrative positions at Morris Brown College, Atlanta, Georgia, Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland Southern University, Shreveport, Louisiana. And Kathie Dr. Golden's been on the faculty of the political science at Clark Atlanta University, University of Colorado, Texas Tech University, and Arkansas State University. She earned her bachelor's and master's degrees in political science and social sciences from Southern University and her PhD in political science from the University of Kentucky. She was Chancellor's postgraduate fellow at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and scholar in communist societies, where she's been awarded for projects in China, Russia, Poland, and Hungary. Her international collaborative work has taken her to Liberia, Mauritania, and Azerbaijan. We've mentioned Azerbaijan in earlier work. Kathie Golden is the National Conference of Black Political Science Executive Director of the Graduate Assistantship Program. Today we'll explore the intersection of academics, advocacy, and activism heaped on her shoulders. Dr. Golden comes to us today from her office in Itta, Mississippi. Welcome to Ask a Leader, Dr. Golden.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to have you on for the full hour. There is a great deal to cover. I'm sure you could probably put this on 4 different conference panels. So we'll try to do justice to these different boxes we're going to open. But I want to find out first, as we do this live, and I'd like to respectfully, Dr. Golden, check in on your disposition and how you're holding up with the demands on you as a woman, a black woman, a black academic in political science and in higher ed administration. And again, checking my calendar in 2022.
So I think I'm holding up well. I kind of live by that scripture that says too much is given, much is required. And so I come from a tradition of hard work, multitasking, and so I think I've done pretty well. I think the hardest thing for me was when we were right in the middle of COVID. And during that time, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 people who were here on the campus throughout the ordeal. And so that took a toll on my health. Fortunately, I recognized what was going on with my body and was able to turn that around. So I think I'm doing okay.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about intersections of all these responsibilities, and so that's part of the public health part. And I'm not sure in the Mississippi state level leadership that you had perhaps more headwinds to deal with the messaging for keeping all the students safe. We're gonna bring all that together. So we're gonna talk now about last week were bomb threats on 17 historically black colleges and university campuses, 5 of them in Mississippi, one of which your campus, Mississippi Valley State University, was affected by that. So we know no bombs were detonated, but the terror intended to be inflicted upon these communities, it did take place, and that sort of reverberates. So like other kinds of suffering, of wounding, the outward signs of damage aren't so apparent, but the internal damage, the intended effect, is what is the problem. So if Dr. Golden, you could talk about the initial realization that this was going down and how the communities were disrupted and how this likely persists up until this very moment.
Yeah, so we received the bomb threat about 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning. And so we do know that it came from a non-local number. Immediately, we decided to how to approach this. So, of course, out of an abundance of caution, our university police coordinated with local officials so that we could, sweep the campus and make sure that there were no bombs. We sent out alerts to the students and faculty. And, of course, many of them, and the students and some of the faculty, of course, immediately took to social media. And so that helped to spread the word. The students were evacuated from their dorms to the gymnasium. Fortunately, we have more commuters that on campus than we do residential students. So we had the capacity to house about 1,000 residential students, and probably I think we had at least 600 or 700 who are on the campus. So we did that, and by mid-morning, everything was cleared. But the disruption and the psychological anguish, especially for those of us who are in charge of the university, was tremendous. I think the students, initially, it didn't really resonate in the same way with them. Some of them were hurt, and we don't know this for sure. That just may have been their way of coping. But I'm sure for some of the students, it was quite traumatic. They have not expressed that in any extent to the administration, but it's something we have to be aware of and keep our eyes on to try to get the pulse of the students and how these situations such as this may have impacted them. Fortunately for us, some of us in the administration, about 2 weeks prior, we had gone through some training on this particular kind of incident. So I think it was in the top of our minds because we knew also that some HBCUs had received threats in January and then the day before. And this is the second time. I know when I first, in my early years here at Mississippi Valley, we had a bomb threat. And so, the students were evacuated from the campus. We had many more students then. Of course, it turned out to not have been anything but a threat. But it's just to even address that, there's time and effort and money that goes into that, right? So it's very disruptive, but you have to take it seriously, because the first time we don't take it seriously may be the time that it actually comes to fruition. It's really a bomb. So, just working through all of those things is tremendous amount of time and effort and psychological anguish, because, we have to be concerned about the students as well as the people who work here on the campus. So it's our responsibility. So that's a lot.
Right. And all of those things are limited resources, limited quantities. So it's taking away from what it could be invested in, whether it's in the learning, it's in the kind of mental health services that are working on the ongoing trauma. And then, are there better ways of expressing these assaults on the campuses that we say received a threat? It just, that passive voice just doesn't work for me. But is there another way to bring this up? And I'm not, listeners, I am not amplifying the perpetrators, and the asymmetry is hurtful enough that there's a few people that could cause so much disruption. But is there a better way to express these kinds of assaults on these communities?
I've thought about that, and I don't, in terms of the terminology, but I think we do have to do due attention to expressing the impact of these threats and assaults on the university, on the people who work here, and on the community writ large. And how do we do that? And I think, for me, I've been thinking about this in the environment, our national climate, which helps to produce this kind of behavior. Extremism is on the rise, has been since the Obama election, right?
Right.
And so it's not that it was not there already, it's just it's more amplified and more visible. People have been empowered in some way to engage in these kinds of activities. And I think part of that extremism is related to the fact that the majority community now sees itself as threatened because they are becoming a minority. And so how do we, this attempt to hold on to power by any means necessary, right? This attempt to further denigrate people who don't look like them. It's all, has become more and more amplified, and especially during the Trump administration. And so you wonder how allegedly the people of interest are some young people. So how did they become these kinds of people? They weren't born that way, right? So it's the climate, it's the environment that encourages that kind of behavior. And I think I thought about it, this is another way to terrorize African American people. And when you think about COVID, you think about, this public health stuff, you think about the assault on voting rights, all those kinds of things have played into, I think, are part of this. Critical race theory, which many people who are anti-critical race don't really understand what it is. So all those things these are out there in the universe, and people are gravitating to them because in some way in their minds, their power, position, and privilege is being attacked.
And I've been thinking about the outsized, the rather considerable profiles of women associated with Howard University come to mind. That we have Vice President Kamala Harris, an alum of Howard, and recently hired Professor Nicole Hannah-Jones, that maybe that those kind of profiles make Howard, among other universities, possible targets for this public, very public, macro aggression. And so even the names of the black jurists being considered for the Supreme Court of the United States nomination process, they were mainly, even though they're mainly educated in the Ivy Leagues, that there may be a connection with the higher profile of all these women and what you're talking about, this sort of zero-sum mentality of white privilege, giving up something.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even we can go back, say, to Obama's election. I would dare say some people voted for him because, of his background in terms of, Ivy League educated, and as they would say, very articulate and excited. And so, those kinds of people who exhibit what they call, acceptable behavior. So
commanding
a person like Obama,
right,
or like some of the possible Supreme Court potential nominees, I think the majority community see them more as safe than, say, a person like you or a person like me, so this sense that they are different from the other, folk that look like them. So all of those things, I think, come into play. It's complicated, but it's like some of us are more palatable to the powers that be than others, even though we look alike and we may have similar intelligence or even more intelligence. It's the palatability. What kinds of people of color are we willing to tolerate? That's kind of how I see part of this.
Okay, thank you. My guest, for those of you who just joined us, is Dr. Kathie Stromile Golden. She's Provost, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Director of International Programs at Mississippi Valley State University, and Executive Director of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. So what processes, Dr. Golden, are underway in the aftermath of these threats so the media attention subsides? I don't think I can find anything covering this since sort of drops off after the middle of last week. So talk about this problem and when I was typing up culprits, the perpetrators, my fingers, they came up with a better word, culprits.
Okay.
The culprits. And I thought, man, I'm going to bring that in there. And so the need here to educate society on the meaning of this assault. I mean, you're on your way to doing that right now with what you've already said. And so, and this, in this climate, the setting where we have half of the country getting infantilized about a good American history ought to be, and the other half, or maybe even more than a half, raging about not learning any of this earlier in our lives. So there's a lot of educating going on post the expression of these assaults. So what kind of an education? I mean, it's such a difficult setting to educate society on the meaning of these assaults.
Yeah, and I think you use culprit. I use criminals.
Correct. Yeah.
Because they are. And I just can't imagine if these kinds of assaults happen for PWIs, this many at one time, what the response would be. I think it would be different. I think it would be more intense, I think there would be more intentionality and urgency of identifying the criminals, the people who are engaged in this activity. We say HBCUs have been under assault forever. Well, that's to say that is to, in a way, dismiss these assaults. Yes, we have been, and yes, we have been resilient and we've survived, but this should not be in the 21st century, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be more intentional, I think, as HBCUs about how we amplify and keep this alive, about, how we express this. Now, some of the presidents a couple of weeks ago, I think after the January attacks, had meetings with Homeland Security about this issue. But I don't recall seeing any statement from Homeland Security on this. I don't. But I think we, our presidents, our alumni, we have to keep this in the forefront. And we have to say, connect the dots. It's not just about these threats. It's about the threats to Black lives, brown lives, in general, right? And so this is just one manifestation of that. When we put all of this together, you think about the rollback of voting rights. We look at redistricting that's going on now. Here in Mississippi, the voting rights under challenge. They've redrawn the district lines where some people think we should have had 2 majority-minority districts. We still have 1, which covers almost the entire state.
Wow.
So all of those things are, in my mind, connected, right? And all of those things can help to embolden people who would assault not only the HBCUs, but people of color in general. And it's not always physical. That mental thing is real, too. And so it is incumbent on the leadership of the HBCUs to, one, we have to educate our students. The students are not sometimes as active as, say, maybe we were in the 60s and 70s, right? So we have to do a better job of educating our students around these issues and encouraging them to take up advocacy roles within the community, to be community activists, all of those things. And we have to train them to be that. That's part of what we hope we do in NCOBPS. But it's incumbent on us as leaders to also ensure that the students we are responsible for educating have more than just an academic education. And we have to, be intentional about that. It's necessary, because when these students leave here, they encounter microaggression, racism, even sometimes here on the campus from some of the professors, but they may not recognize it as
No. Oh
yeah. So, it's because HBCUs, interestingly, HBCUs have always been open to everyone, regardless of race, nationality, ethnicity, all of those things. And a good number of HBCUs were founded by Caucasians.
Was with that being that the agriculturally chartered kind of campus? Is that?
Well, those land grant campus universities were, they came about in part because the powers that be didn't want the black folk going to the white schools, right? And so they created these land grant institutions, and they were supposed to be funded by the federal government and the state with matching. Well, most of those land grant institutions have been seriously underfunded, billions over the years from day one. And so even the land grants, those were more like state institutions than, say, for example, Jackson State, Howard, Morgan State. Jackson State started out as a church school that was founded by Caucasians. Same as Morgan was found, in Howard. So we have schools like that. Of course, Howard is private, but Morgan and Jackson State are state institutions now. And I think many students, the current students, are not even aware of that history, that legacy, how some of these universities came to be, and what that means. So recently, Forbes did a piece on the underfunding of black land grant institutions compared to white land grant institutions. And I think in this state, Alcorn, which is in the state of Mississippi, is the oldest HBCU land grant institution. And so even it has not been funded to the extent that it should. Of course, its funding has been more than some other land grant institutions, but they've all been underfunded.
And Alcorn also was a subject of these bomb threats last week.
Yeah.
So that's just to...
Uh-huh.
So for those of you who just joined us, my guest is Kathie Stromile Golden. She's Provost, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Director of International Program at Mississippi Valley State University. And she's also Executive Director of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. And we're talking about the kinds of assaults, and this is like the underfunding is like some serious macroaggression. I mean, it has to be categorized as that. Well, so talk to us, Dr. Golden, about how Black political science academics negotiate the work in which you're engaging, the choices you make with so much need straddling academic, advocacy, and activist roles. And now rule number one for everybody is don't just ask in a facile way. Don't nimbly just say, well, we need you to be on this committee. And it turns out that the minority Black faculty member has to be the sort of representative of Blackness on every single committee, so that one person is holding down so many different roles. So I want to know let's roll back to my general question about straddling all those roles and how to maintain your your vigor, how to maintain your academic sort of goals and objectives. I mean, there's so many hats.
There are, and those hats vary depending on the kind of campus you're on. So, for example, my colleagues who are on the campuses of PWIs, and it depends on whether it could be private, state, top tier, second tier, or whatever. So it's a tremendous juggling act, and not all of us participate in the same way. So, for example, you could have a Black political scientist who's at an Ivy League school, and they are doing, all the checks, but they may not be engaged in activist work. They may be doing the safe kind of things. So they may serve on a committee. They may or may not have strong relationships to other African-American students on the campus. That may not be a part of their kind of operating procedure.
Dr.
They
Golden,
may be more concerned with, not upsetting the status quo and getting tenure.
Well, just one moment, Dr.
Then
Golden.
you have others who would say, I have to be engaged in community work and activism, even though I'm going to do these other things too. And many of us, our research revolves around political activism, studying it, and also engaging in it. And some campuses are more amenable to that than others, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the choice the individual makes. So if your guiding principle is to be successful as defined by someone else, then you're going to do the things that you think you need to do to be successful by somebody else's standards. If your guiding principle is to be true to who you are and to be of service to your community and society, then you can approach your research, your teaching, your work on the campus in a very different way. Mm-hmm. And you may pay a cost for that, right? But at the end of the day, if this is who you are and you're being true to yourself, then you have no regrets. So I guess this is a way of saying that all of us who are Black political scientists don't identify as Black political scientists, okay? And so we may not even be invested in the African American community, seriously invested in the way that some of our colleagues are. So I think you can find all kinds of people or different persuasion among Black political scientists. But for the National Conference of Black Political Scientists, we celebrate Black scholarship, we celebrate scholar activists, we honor them, and we see that as one of our mottos is, we are in the service of the liberation of people of African descent. And so if we're true to that, then we have to be activists. We have to advocate. We have to do those things that would enrich our lives as well as the lives of the African American community, people of color, poor people, all of those things. And so we do encourage that. We honor it. We give an award for that every year because that's important to who we are and doing what we say we do and being true to our mission.
So thank you for that. And yeah, Dr. Wilden, I just want to interject, though, for those that are not on board with the PWI means predominantly white institutions. And I'm just puzzling when I think of UC Irvine. I don't think we think of ourselves as predominantly white in terms of the Pacific Rim demographic here. So it may be that changes a little bit. It's just underrepresenting Black members of the community, on the campus. And I know there's such a, there's so the critical mass of Black members of the UCI campus is very small. It's not critical, and the identification is very, very, very problematic, including with the actual faculty. They have a very, very it's a rough time here, but it's so predominantly white institutions it's an interesting term to use when we're thinking of like the California universities. That may have to change in some kind of a descriptor. So I'm just putting that out there. So if you could talk.
Yeah, I could say, and some institutions that were historically identified as PWIs are now called MSIs.
Okay, multi.
Refers to minority serving institutions.
Okay.
So it means, and that's based on the student demographics.
Okay.
So right here, about 45 miles from where I am, there's another state institution, Delta State, which was a PWI and is now classified as an MSI because of the number of Black and brown students they have.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you see that, and that is even interesting too.
Right.
Because historically, some funds that may have more of the funds that would come to HBCUs as designated HBCUs, the competition is greater now because the MSIs are thrown in that as well. So you will often see HBCUs, MSIs. Sometimes you'll just see MSIs, and it becomes so. If there's a federal grant out there and it says MSI, well, as an HBCU, you could apply, you would qualify, but now the moniker is MSI.
Right.
And then I had this discussion on Sunday with Tiffany.
On our campus here, yes.
Yes, Willoughby-Herard. Some of the MSIs get those funds, and there's no accountability for it.
Oh, wow.
And these are federal funds. So, and the students who should benefit from those funds are not necessarily the primary beneficiaries. So even that, it's all those things are going on as well. So, so the pot of money is small, so you increase the number of people who qualify to apply for those funds. And so even that then is can be a challenge for HBCUs, which historically, they say, okay, this is for HBCUs. Now it's HBCUs and MSIs.
Wow.
So, we are all forever playing catch up, because we've not been treated in the way, from day one, even with the land grant institutions. You just look at the land grant HBCUs and the billions of dollars that they have lost out on just because the states and the federal government didn't fund them in the same way that they funded the white PWIs, the PWIs land grant. Yeah. It's a complicated maze, right?
Right.
But we keep trying to chip away as much as we can. And I would dare say that even for some presidents of HBCUs, especially those who are in state systems, there's a fine line that they walk. And, some choose to be safe and walk that line, So others choose to say, well, this may be the line, but I'm going over this line because this is important to me.
Right.
This is important for our students. This is important for our community. So even among the HBCUs, you know, the leadership is varied. You have presidents who are quite vocal and outspoken and willing to take risk, and you will have others who are just going to play it safe.
Well, Dr. Golden, there's one other differential, a disparity in the HBCUs, too, that I wanted just to bring up just in passing before we talk about the intersectionality of what political scientists are dealing with on all the campuses. But the veterans' benefits after World War II were very differential in how they were made available. Black veterans were not getting the same kinds of resources that white veterans were getting, and that showed up in the HBCU funding as well, did it not?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And even now, there are some, you know, programs that are targeted toward veterans, but I'm not sure, you know, of all of the funding. I know we just recently received a grant from the Department of Ed. It's probably between $500,000 over maybe 3 or 5 years to assist veterans. But it's not just black ones. It can be any of them in the Delta. So in this area, and quite frankly, you know, part of the challenge is being able to identify those veterans. Some we know of, but there's quite a bit of work because it may require coordinating with the Veterans Administration and of course, you know, they are in, I don't know how to describe. They are similar to the IRS and disorganized. So,
right, undermined, underfunded. Yeah.
So even that, but it's not just for veterans of color. It's for all veterans.
So you were talking about the black political scientists and associating with the national conference that you are the executive director for. And so if you could, and I know it's a really important institution, and I'm thinking, though black political scientists have so much intersection with other disciplines on all the campuses, and I'm thinking of the amazing forums that I've been able to witness at UCI that deal with intersectionality. There's the law school, there's humanities, there's public health, and even the physical sciences promoting the STEM careers for persons of color. So could you talk about how that intersectionality is addressed with the National Conference of Black Political Scientists? It's pretty big.
So first, let's say this: we're a National Conference of Black Political Scientists, but we have members that span a number of disciplines. So that's one thing, and practitioners, politicians, community activists. So we bring all these different strands together in one setting. So NCOBPS does not discriminate in terms of its membership and disciplinary training. So we do that, and many of our members collaborate across disciplines with researchers. For example, even here myself, I've done stuff in public health with people in public health. Right now, we are involved in a project with a public health project that focuses on COVID and comorbidities among African Americans and people here in the Delta. So we've always, encouraged that intersectionality and explore things from multiple perspectives, and I dare say many of the members of NCOBPS are, we talk about intersectionality all the time. And so people do research around, different topics and issues. For example, we're political scientists, but we are always concerned with policy and policy making, policy outcomes, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be in transportation, education, all of those things. So this NCOBPS is a space where we encourage the looking at things from varied lens and encourage people to collaborate across the disciplinary divides. Myself as a political scientist, but most of the international projects that I have directed have been in the STEM area. So, and I teasingly say I learned STEM from doing. So,
right.
And there's always a policy perspective, I think, to look at, even in terms of how the policy came to be, how it evolved over time, how, you know, all of those things. So and for us as Black political scientists, I think we always have to have or give some consideration to the impact of policies at the state, local, national, even international policy, Black lives. And I think we can learn from that. It gives us a lens from which to maybe approach things differently. It can inform how we engage in activism and the different dynamics. So I don't know how you can study political science in a vacuum. I just don't. I don't see it.
Exactly. And the further education, besides that, I just want to, I guess, for people to let sink in this idea about policy, it's sort of the deep breathing versus the shallow breathing of politics. And that's where the media always abdicates its responsibility in all of the politic of something, and the policy gets lost, and the literacy of the civic society is wasted there. It's yeah. So I want to talk about the matter of how exhausting it is for political scientists and all Black members of our society to bring this society along with all the missed history over the 4 centuries. And just recently, I was informed about the New York City Central Park displacing the Seneca community. I'd been aware of Bruce Beach in Los Angeles being displaced by eventually the Ku Klux Klan, icing out the family members from that beautiful beach up in north of the airport area there. It's a whole subfield in political science to catch everybody up. That must be exhausting.
It is, and you talk about even if you think about Tulsa and the Black Wall Street.
Right.
We have here in Mississippi the town of Mound Bayou, which was founded by Black folk, and it was self-sufficient. It's, and now they're trying to do some things to bring attention back to it. There are so many people who don't know about these places, who don't know here in Mississippi. A lot of African Americans had their land stolen from them, or this whole thing about how USDA discriminated against Black farmers. People are not knowledgeable of a lot of people, and I dare say our young people, this is it, unless their parents probably taught them, they've never heard of this,
Right.
I would dare say even right here in this university and some other HBCUs, the students are not as aware of our history as they should be. And I would even argue that we haven't done our part to ensure that the students who matriculate at HBCUs fully understand the history of African Americans in this country. It's amazing that what students, well, it's not amazing. You consider our education system and how it's morphed since the 1970s. It's not amazing.
Right.
Even at that, I think HBCUs have to do a better job of promoting and understanding of the history.
Amanda, it seems like we may have lost sound, but this might be a good
It ended.
place.
It ended.
Okay, so this would be a good place to make our transition. So Dr. Garish, please go right ahead with your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to NCOBPS for our 2022 conference. It's so great to be here with all of you and to learn the wisdom that we all share. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick to show one of the initiatives that we're having throughout the conference, which is a scavenger hunt. In order to engage the virtual platform, it's always fun to make possible some of the amazing things that are here. So one of the things I want to encourage people to think about over the next few days is as you are, engaging the online platforms, take a look at our exhibitor hall. There's a bunch of great resources in there from our wonderful sponsors like APSA and Pi Sigma Alpha, as well as some really great discounts on books from our two sponsors, the University of Chicago Press and University of Michigan Press. Some of that can be found in the actual exhibitors hall, and some of it can be found in our conference program. I also want you to encourage everybody to attend panels and plenaries. As you attend those panels and plenaries, take some screenshots, save them, because there is a scavenger hunt form that you can fill out by the end of Sunday in order to be put into a raffle for one of these great prizes, depending on your registration criteria, right? If you're an undergraduate student and you do the scavenger hunt and you submit the form by Sunday, you could be in a raffle to draw for a one-year NCOBPS membership prize. For graduate students, we have a bundle of print copies of past issues of National Political Science Review that if you're, you do that form, you fill it out, you can be in that raffle. And then finally, for those of us who are professional retired academics, there's a great bundle of books featuring the scholarship and life of Dr. Cedric J. Robinson that is the prize for that category. So just to remind everybody, if you're on the platform, you can get to the exhibitors hall at the bottom here. This button will take you to the exhibitors hall and you can take a look at there at all of the things. One of the things I want to encourage people to think about is up here. To the right is our NCOBPS booth. On that booth, if you click on it and go down to the bottom where it says meet now, to this right, all of these actually you can click on, but in the bottom right, click on the meet now, you can get access to that slide that I just shared on the screen to remind you of all of the stuff. But also there's more information in there that you might need to look at for getting that information to fill out that form. Last but not least, the digital program can be located here in the tab digital program. When you click on it, it'll open up in a new PDF for you, and you can take a look at the PDF version of the virtual program. So thank you so much, and that's all I'm going to say, and I'll pass it back off to Tiffany.
So thanks, everyone. And I know there was one chat that Kevin Jones put a long kind of explanations. Kevin, I'm going to read it out loud. And for the sake of time, just so that people can hear your voice in case they can't see it in the Q&A. So Kevin writes, when, quote, they didn't want Blacks in their schools, they started charters through privatization. The speaker mentioned something about this whole thing of, quote, PWI, MSI being complicated, but it doesn't seem complicated at all. The same fight is happening with the leaders of the ADOS movement in the call for reparations, and how attempts to co-opt it by allowing reparations for everyone from immigrants to DACA. The quote, racism in a new code is simply America not wanting to acknowledge the source of main issues and people. Dr. Jones, we may disagree on a whole bunch of pieces of that question, but I'm so grateful that you posted it. And if we were all together, we would get all in the weeds about it. We would sit right there at that hotel bar and have cherry cokes and talk for the next 5 hours about all the things that you raised. We're going to close the session out with a video that I think is going to make some of you actually cry. Every time I watch it, it makes me cry. But here we are, folks. Go right ahead, Amanda, please.